So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started with our webinar. We still have folks that are logging in. I will make a few opening remarks. My name is Danny Seabright, President of the US-UAE Business Council. We are honored today to have a distinguished panel of trailblazing women in the finance sector, both in the United States and the United Arab Emirates. This is a webinar about the power of women leading in finance today. And it's part of the Business Council's program this fall, Back to Business webinar series. This is also part of a larger series of initiatives the Business Council has launched to highlight and support gender equality in the workplace. If you want to ask questions throughout the program, please use the chat function. Please also see the chat function for more information about our initiatives in this regard. I could not be more delighted to be joined today on this virtual stage with leading women in the finance industry from the United Arab Emirates and the United States. We are pleased to have over 250 registered guests for today's webinar, comprising business executives, government officials, and thought leaders from the US, UAE, and the wider region. We're especially pleased to have friends from Israel joining in today's webinar as well. So thank you. I would like to acknowledge both my very good friend Dima Al-Faham, the Chief of Staff to Ambassador Al-Taiba, who is joining today, and Nadia Virji, the Chief of Staff to another longtime and dear friend, Her Excellency Reem Al-Hashmi. I would also like to acknowledge a number of students from NYU Abu Dhabi and the American University of Sharjah. It's really, really important and heartwarming to me that we have students on the line today to take note of the important stories our guests, our panelists are going to discuss. The future, and as we continue to work, we look to all of you, the students on the line today, for the future and the importance of what you will bring to the conversation. The session is on the record, and a video recording of this event will be posted on YouTube at the end. We will also send around a copy of the video to everyone who attended and to everyone who registered for the event. Attendees can, as I said, use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens for any questions that you might have for our panelists as we walk through. What I'm going to do, without further ado, is introduce my dear friend Rola Abumana, who has been the CEO of Standard & Chartered UAE since August 2018. She is the first Emirati woman to head or lead a bank in the UAE. In her role, Rola has been responsible for transforming the UAE business into one of the biggest 5 markets for the Standard & Chartered Group. Over the years, Rola has championed women empowerment and female entrepreneurship through various initiatives and is committed to supporting the wider community by providing university students with mentorship programs in collaboration with leading partners that aim to prepare participants with the necessary skills to succeed in their chosen professions. Rola will speak for a few minutes, and then in turn, I will introduce the rest of the panelists who will each speak for a few minutes, and then we will have a Q&A. Rola, I'm so proud and pleased to have you here with us today. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak today and along with my esteemed colleagues. I think the topic of basically women in finance, it's very close to my heart. And as you said, I've been championing it for over a few years. I've been 26 years in banking. And as we know, banking is more of a male-dominated industry. But when I look at how the UAE has been progressing when it comes to women empowerment, it makes me feel very proud and privileged to be part of this country. Because when we look at the government, it's really ahead. And with the recent legislations where we've had equal pay in the private sector, equal gender pay, as well as the commitment of the country to be the top 25 countries globally to support women in, in empowerment. So from that angle, I'm very positive, and I think and I'm looking forward to this event today.
Rolla, thank you very, very much. I appreciate that. With that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Gail Dady. Gail's in Washington, D.C., so we appreciate her getting on early this morning. Gail's a partner at DC Capital Partners, a longtime friend and supporter of the Business Council. DC Capital Partners is a private equity investment firm that makes control equity investments in middle market companies that provide differentiated and innovative services and solutions, in the government contracting, engineering, and construction services markets. Gail has been a partner at DC Capital Partners since the firm's inception. She has over 24 years of investment experience, ranging from investment banking to private equity. Gail also has, as I said, a longtime member of the council's board of directors. And Gail, I would be remiss if I didn't mention your military and defense service in an earlier part of your career. So if you want to say a word or two about that, I'm sure some of our guests, particularly the students, would be interested in that. Gail, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Danny, and thanks for inviting me to participate and for organizing this event. And I'm really honored to be on with such a group of talented women. And I'm excited to hear there are a lot of students on. I hope the students out there will ask a lot of questions as we go along, because sometimes we learn more from them than they do from us, I think. As Danny said, I didn't come to this sector of the economy, if you will, by a normal means. I don't have a degree in business, never took an accounting course. So I'm kind of the oddity. I had a career in the Navy and retired from the US Navy. And a friend of mine had gone to Harvard Business School in Wall Street, wanted to start his own firm, and asked if I would join. And I didn't even know what an investment banker was. I couldn't define private equity for you. But somehow I opened that door and walked through, and it's been very rewarding career. I think when we talk about the financial sector, we scare off a lot of people because they think it's numbers. People are sitting at the desk all day doing numbers. And I know from the M&A side, and particularly from the private equity side, that is not the case. So I think women have a much broader opportunity to think strategically, to be creative, to create value in companies, to exercise their leadership skills as they lead management teams forward into new endeavors and new markets and new capabilities. So I think there's a lot to this industry. And if we're going to recruit more women into the industry, I think we need to make them aware of that. We also need to kind of tell them what they're getting into. Yes, it's a male-dominated industry. It's very much like the military. And I know that sounds a bit odd, but it's male-dominated. There's a crisis every minute, although some of those crises are self-generated in our industry. It's your time is not your own. There's a lot of work that goes into this. I will say that the good thing about it is there are very few lines at the ladies' room when you have meetings. So that's a good thing. You can always get in the door and out. So, so I think we need to recruit a lot more women into this space. And if I said anything to women, there's a lot of things that you need to know to the young women, but I think the most important thing is to have a mentor. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a woman mentor. It's nice if you can, but they're not always available. So a male mentor is equally effective because you need to learn your industry and you need to learn your job. But look to those people to help you because they are there. Our firm is 50% women. And I'm very proud of that fact. It's taken us a while to get there. We're a small firm, so it's not as difficult as a Citibank or something like that to reach those kinds of numbers. But I think we can all do our part, and we're always there, I think, senior women to help the younger ones. We just ask us, we're there. Back to you, Danny.
Danny, you're on mute.
Sorry, David. Thank you. Gail, I was saying thank you for that. That was a great shout out, if you will, for the recruitment piece of what we're trying to do today, which is to help younger folks on the line see the pathways to jobs and careers in this vertical, in this sector. I'd like to pivot and now introduce Shamsa Al-Falasi, who is the head of the Global Subsidiaries Group for the GCC and Iraq at Citigroup, which has a presence in both the DIFC and the ADGM, which is an interesting new development with a lot of the banking corporates and verticals coming out here. Shamsa is also co-chair of Citi's Women's Network in the UAE and a City Women Leadership and Development Program Community Ambassador. Shamsa, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Danny, and good morning, good evening, everyone. First of all, Danny, thank you for setting this up. It's extremely important to see such, it's empowering as well to see such a extremely important quorum together as well to talk about women in finance. This topic is always on our minds on a regular basis. And while we work on our day-to-day, we connect with either colleagues, students, and clients to talk about how we can increase the importance of women in finance and in banking as well. In the day-to-day interactions we have, we always talk about topics related to diversity and inclusion, and it's always at the back of our mind. It's extremely important, for instance, from a city perspective on the topics that we usually discuss. And it's great to see, as Rola mentioned, for instance, there has been a lot of efforts over the past few years that the UAE has put in place to focus on increasing the number of women in leadership levels within the banking sector as well. At the moment, for instance, there are around 7,200 females in the banking sector, and it's been increasing, 58% of them, for instance, in leadership positions. Having said that, I think each and every one of us are contributing as well and will help contribute to increasing the number of employees in the banking sector as well. As I highlighted, diversity and inclusion remains extremely important. So as Gail highlighted earlier, I'm excited that there are a lot of students on board. The finance and banking sector remains a question mark sometimes to them, but it is exciting, it is changing, and there are a lot of skill sets that we will continue to require as well to keep them excited as well when they join us. But excited to be here and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Shamsa, very much appreciate that. I'd like to now introduce Raja Al-Mazruri, who is the Executive Vice President of the Fintech Hive at Dubai International Financial Center. We brought a group of fintech companies to visit almost a year ago, and we had the distinct pleasure of coming to the Fintech Hive and having briefings, and we were also very, very impressed. The Fintech Hive helps startups do business by providing them with accelerator programs, licensing, co-working support, a community of like-minded individuals, and an enabling regulatory framework. Raja, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Danny, for inviting me and including me in this important session. I am glad to be here to contribute a little bit to an important initiative in my country and in my sector. As Rola mentioned, the UAE takes the diversity issues really seriously, and there are many initiatives to include more women in government and private and public sectors. And I have been with the Financial Center for the past 10 years, and I've had the pleasure to meet amazing female leaders within the sector. So in 2017, we launched the Fintech Hive with the aim of creating opportunities of collaboration between financial institutions and tech companies. And throughout shaping a new industry within the financial services sector, we realized an opportunity to engage more women as well in digital transformation roles and innovation and within the startups ecosystem. So we launched a program called Accelerate Her, and that looks at female talent from the financial services sector, connect them with mentors from financial institutions like Rula and Shamsa, and also introduce them to industry workshops both from financial institutions and from tech companies, and to the startups to help them figure out the opportunities to grow their career, launch their own businesses, and take active roles within tech and innovation within the financial services sector. We've graduated about 26 ladies out of this program so far, and we're looking at launching additional cohorts in the years to come to include more women within this journey.
Thank you so much, Raja, very much appreciated. And for our last guest this evening, I'd very much like to introduce Mercedes Vila Montserrat, who is the Associate Director of International Affairs at the Abu Dhabi Global Markets Financial Services Regulatory Authority. ADGM is an award-winning international financial center that opened for business in October 2015 and ensures a business-friendly environment that operates in line with international best practices recognized by financial centers across the globe. Mercedes is spearheading ADGM's work on sustainable finance and gender diversity, in addition to other ADGM-wide special projects reporting directly to the CEO. And Mercedes told us earlier she just returned from Spain and is just back from a few days in Spain and is just back fresh in the UAE and ready to go. Mercedes, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Danny, for your kind words. I'm delighted to be here for this webinar. So as mentioned, I work for ADGM, Abu Dhabi's International Finances Center, where I'm leading the work on sustainable finance, looking clearly at climate change, but also very closely our diversity and inclusion agenda on gender equality. Now, I think in the past, climate change and gender equality have sometimes been something for governments or NGOs to worry about. But I think it has now grown from an aspirational statement of moral responsibilities to a key performance metric and an investment strategy. It has been proven that companies whose leadership team is gender balanced have a higher return on equity when compared to organizations whose senior management team consists of men only. I think also the social and economic challenges we are currently facing increase the urgency to address and discuss the issue around gender inequality in the workplace. Now more than ever, we need to frame women equally as leaders, as innovators, as employees, value chain members, and consumers. As mentioned earlier as well, ADGM has now launched a gender equality initiative that looked at strengthening gender equality across all job functions within the workplace. And again, as mentioned by the other speakers, this is very much in line with the UAE government vision 2021 of enhancing gender equality in the workplace, very much aligned with the UN 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. Clearly, the UAE has a commendable record when it comes to gender equality at entry level. But it's true as well that the proportion of women in senior leadership role remains an area for improvement. And we see that here in the UAE, but also all around the world. We at ADGM believe that providing a more balanced, better skilled workforce is essential for the growth of an organization and society as a whole. Because what we are talking about here is greater competitiveness, better results, and ultimately delivering key business objectives times again. In order to do that, and what I mean by all of this is that we need to establish environments as financial regulators as well, in which everyone feels welcome to share experiences, introduce new ideas, and most importantly, challenge standing status quo. It also means moving from making inclusion a priority to a real value, because values do not change, but priorities do. I hope the discussion today will be fruitful and that we continue after these conversations so that together we can construct an economic recovery from this pandemic, which places gender at its core to deliver a more sustainable future. Thank you, Danny. Thank you all.
Mercedes, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. Let's, ladies, let's jump into the discussion if we can. And I'm going to ask each of you some individual questions, but I thought we'd start off with a general question, if it's all right, that we received from a brand new member of the US-UAE Business Council. The name of the company is Transparent Business, and they've submitted a question along the following lines. Transparent Business is associated with a platform called She Works! That helps companies drive diversity by connecting them with an international pool of certified professional women while providing tools to hire, monitor, and manage distributed teams. The question for the group is as follows. Companies are having to face many new challenges when it comes to talent acquisition, especially during the time of COVID, making it clear that a more proactive approach needs to be in place if they want to address these imbalances when scaling and diversifying their teams. At the same time, you hear these same companies state there is a pipeline issue and they are not finding the right skills. Do you think there is a pipeline issue when it comes to diversity hiring? If so, how would you attract qualified talent? That's a question for all of you to take us, maybe a few remarks at answering. Who wants to go first?
Okay, perhaps if I may.
Go ahead, Mercedes, please.
So looking particularly at the UAE though, and looking at the data, and I think this is quite remarkable as well, 70% of the undergraduates in the UAE are women. Now the issue that we are facing in the UAE is that even though 70% are women, women only represent 10% in senior roles in the private sector. So really looking at the UAE, the issue for us is not so much a lack of talent. The talent is there. The issue is how do we get those women into top managerial roles? And I think this was already highlighted in some of the introductions. I think sponsors are key. I think networking is key. Mentoring is key. And then working, I think the role also of the employer here is crucial. You need to come up with frameworks and policies that are gender neutral from the start, from the hiring to the retention to bringing people to top levels to ensure that there are not any bias. That will be my answer to that. But really looking at the UAE, the talent, the pool of talent is definitely there. The issue is how do we get that talent to the top?
So Rola, also from an international firm, not just with the UAE focus, but being in the UAE and focused on the UAE, I mean, the UAE has done an amazing job, from my perspective, of promoting women, putting women in the top ranks of government. I mean, I think it has one of the most balanced executive suites, if you will, across the government sector of many, many governments in the world. From that same perspective on business, then, to answer the question a little bit more from your perspective, what more can business do to make sure there's more balance on the business side of the equation going forward in the UAE?
Thank you, Danny. I think if we look at the UAE and we look in particular at the finance sector, I mean, while women are, as Shamsa said, there's a large majority of women, Emirati women in the finance sector. But if we look at the senior women across the finance sector, the percentage is very low. And this is why it's because they tend to really drop off as they move up. It could be family commitments. It could be the type of work. I mean, banking in general does take time, around 5 years really to say you've just started to grasp banking. What it comes and what we need is basically it should start from the family. That gender equality should start from home, where there is no differentiation what a male or female are interested in doing, and supporting the daughter in any type of degree that she would like to study. That's very important. At the same time is when they join, when they join the work, we encourage them to really be themselves, to be eager to learn, to be very creative, because that thinking out of the box, because that's very important. And this is what COVID has taught us as well, in terms of what are the pillars that we're looking for to acquire new talent. And one good thing about women is they do very well in teamwork. And this is one of the criteria, and women likes to work in teams. But there is also an element that they're a bit shy, and to grasp, to move forward in their career. They need to do the job 100%. And if you look at the males, they would do 50% and the rest on the training. So it's a balance between the person, she herself, as well as the employer of choice. I mean, if I look at Standard Chartered, diversity and inclusion is key for us. And we look at diversity is getting the mix right, inclusion is making the mix work. So it starts right from the hiring process, where our process is whether it's the panel, where it's very fair, there's a mix of male, female. In the CVs, it has to be male and female in terms of the applicants applying throughout. And so it is also the tone from the top at the institution, where they have to support gender equality.
Thank you, Rola. Shamsa, and then Gail, from a U.S. perspective. I know, Shamsa, you're obviously in the UAE, but representing Citi, and Gail in the United States representing DC Capital Partners. You want to offer a couple comments on?
Yes.
Go ahead, Shamsa.
I was actually waiting for you to see if you're coming up with another question. Just to add, so just to take a step back, first of all, and this is going back to the comments that we've all collectively highlighted. I agree with Rola in terms of the individual's choice and the studies and everything that they do. But where we really come into play is we increase awareness on a regular basis. So for example, apart from us being bankers and heading senior positions in the banking sector, what we typically do is prior to graduating, we collaborate whether with universities, with schools, students. We answer their questions in terms of what is the finance and banking sector? What does it mean to me? What am I going to learn? What is the future perspective if I join that specific sector? And back in the day, the more and more we hear questions from the students, we realize that their understanding could be perhaps to some extent limited, because, for example, if someone is focused on marketing, they think the banking sector might not be suitable for them. If they are looking at digitization, and this is an accelerated point in the current environment, they don't really realize whether the banking sector would have something to offer for them to grow in that perspective. So increasing awareness is extremely important prior to joining the sector. And definitely organizations like the ones that we belong to does this actively. Apart from this, once they are hired, then attaching them to a mentor at some point is extremely important. I'm sure in other banking sector, they do have graduates program, which we have something similar in Citi called Mihnati, which translates into my career, whereby when we hire new employees, we ensure that they rotate. Obviously, this is catered specifically to UAE nationals for us to increase awareness. So they do have a rotation throughout the departments. They do understand in terms of their preference, what skills they will learn, what skills do they need to grow actually in those departments. And accordingly, they get allocated once they graduate from the program. And post that, there are tons of trainings that we can offer to the students to continue their growth. And wherever they end up in each department, there is always a clear path that gets that gets communicated to them eventually. So for example, we do have a lot of employees, and the beauty is, for instance, because we are in 100 countries, they do get that opportunity of moving around, learning from other markets of how things are being. So it depends at the end of the day, as Rola mentioned, on the individual, but there are opportunities and there are challenges with them. So it comes down to coaching and mentoring those employees to grow within their career as well and in the industry.
Shamsa, outstanding. You covered some very good points there. Gail, from a U.S. perspective in Washington, D.C., do you want to touch on this a little bit? And then I'm going to ask Raja, because Raja's dealing with the cutting edge of all the young entrepreneurs coming in at the Hive. So we'll get right to what the young kids are saying and doing. But Gail, go ahead first.
Well, I'd like to touch on something that Rolla said, because I think it may be the most difficult thing we face in the industry as a whole. And a lot of industries face this as well. I know in dealing with our portfolio companies that are engineering companies, the more technical industries, we have this same problem. And that's we have lots of young people coming in that are very talented, and a lot are women. We can't seem to keep those women up until senior levels. And Danny, as you know, the greatest experiment of this was probably the US military, where you can't be a captain of a ship until you have been a navigator, until you've been an engineer, until you've had the leadership roles. So it took us 20 years to get senior women in the military after we changed our policies. I think we did that quite a while ago in the banking industry. We provided a lot more opportunity, but we seem to be losing those women after a few years. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think we have to put more effort into trying to keep those. But because without that middle experience level that you get, where you're so important to the company and it's so critical to your learning to actually take on senior leadership roles, we're not going to really see those numbers at the top. So I think, Rolla, that was a very, very important point there, and something that we all have to work on and try and solve.
So Gail, does more need to be done? I mean, obviously, at some point, the woman thinks about raising a family, and those responsibilities and requirements conflict, if you will, if that's the right word, with then going further in the professional track. Does more need to be done to accommodate that? I mean, just a very bottom line question.
Well, I think it does, but it's a personal choice too. And you do have to, some women can figure out how to do that, how to balance that whole work-life thing. I don't have children, so I haven't had the issue. So I would leave that question to those of you who do. And I'm sure there are others who have had to balance that. But I think, yes, we have to be a bit more accommodating, but at the same time, the women have to go through the process of the learning and the work and supporting the company at the same time. So it's not easy.
Yeah, I tell my students that I mentor all the time that you have to always keep in mind those requirements and those priorities in your life, and they change as you move along the path. Raja, I think Rolla wants a 2-second intervention here before we go to you. Go ahead, Rolla.
No, I think, Danny, if and we should, with the future of work and with the number of organizations moving to work from home or a hybrid model. I mean, we at Standard Chartered, we've made this announcement and we're going ahead with a hybrid model. This should give a chance to the females really to be able to manage a work-life balance while still working from home, few days in office, taking care of the family. So I am hopeful, and I think this is something very positive going forward for women in general.
So the COVID experience has accelerated all of this working from home. And so that might be some of the lemonade that comes out of the lemons of COVID, is that we are all more comfortable working from home. Although I personally have had enough. I want to be back on the road. I want to be back in the office. I want home to be home and work to be work. Two different things. Raja, how the startups that you're dealing with in the fintech, what's your perspective into answering this question from what they say to you and from your experiences with them, please?
Obviously, the digital transformation has accelerated on its own due to COVID. Although COVID is not the perfect environment to accelerate this, but it has enabled access to all of these digital platforms that enabled more engagement from minor groups, if I may say. I know as women, it's usually challenging. And personally, I have 2 kids. And at the time of having my children, I thought it was a challenge, it was a struggle, I'm missing out on my career. But honestly, a few years later and working throughout all of the life-work balance, I realized it's not a race. You know, I would contribute, but I would, in the same time, balance what's important for me. And once these kids and the family is stable, they're in school, I was able to plug into the work environment and accelerate and catch up. But as Rula mentioned, we've realized a lot of institutions has enabled this remote working option, including most of the financial institutions, government institutions, even at the DIFC, we have this option for the ones that want to continue to work remotely. And this gives female the opportunity to be active and engaged within the workforce, regardless. The other idea was this whole digital transformation has enabled everyone to understand what's available in terms of technology, not necessarily working for an institution, but having access to an ecosystem of regulatory framework, of commercial licenses, of opportunities to set up your own company from the comfort of your own home, actually it opens the door for a lot of women to access the workplace from wherever they are. And we see a lot of women join the startup industry and ecosystem today more than ever, because these opportunities are available. There is institutions that are focused on developing the female talent. We see VCs that are investing only in female co-founded businesses. And there are organizations that support and actually search for these talents, because they understand that diversity at the leadership, at the founders level, will actually bring in positive results for these institutions. And as Mercedes mentioned, there is talent, but we need to continue to talk about this topic. We need to continue to put in programs to handhold these women throughout their journey. And this is where we see the contribution and support from the sector important in mentorship and acceleration program, talent acceleration program, like the one we do at the Fintech Hive Accelerator. There is Reach mentorship in the DIFC. There is the 30% club that is focused on getting more women on corporate boards. We have a lot of initiatives in the UAE, the gender balance entity that is looking at including more women at senior management level, at company directors level, that are supporting those engagements. However, we need to continue to talk about it, to also influence more women to take those opportunities forward and be more active in the workplace.
Thank you very much, Raja. A few questions from the audience that sort of weave in and out of some questions that we had put together here. For Rola, for Gail, you're both very accomplished and let's say senior, not senior as in old, but senior as in advanced in your careers. And some of the questions are, what obstacles did you face in achieving your success in a male-dominated industry? And how did you surmount some of those obstacles? And then opening it up to the, again, to draw out to the rest of the folks on the panel, how do we encourage, what advice do you have for future generations to continue this process of getting beyond these obstacles? So Rola first, and then Gail, and then I'll open it up if anyone else has a comment on that question.
Thank you, Danny. I'll ignore the senior, as you said. I'll take it career-wise, not age-wise. So obviously, for me, it's beyond 26 years in banking, coming to 27 years. And I would say what gives me pleasure is when I meet our undergrads that joined the bank. I love to talk to them because it would remind me the days I had joined the bank. And I would tell them one thing is they should really aim and follow their passion and never give up or say, oh, I can never reach that position. They should have that pride in themselves and confidence. It's all about confidence and ability to learn, earn the respect of your colleagues. And you will have different managers throughout. Some will be difficult ones, some will be easy, some will really mentor you well, but it is ability to be agile and be able to take everything with an open mind. Learning as you go, it would be the number one. Even at my level, if I didn't come to learn to every day to office and learn something new, I would be bored. Because with learning, you really progress, expand your career, and develop yourself. So that's one advice. The other advice would be that they really need to be very focused on what they want, whether it's finance or any other career they choose, because at the beginning, it will be hard because it's grasping lots of information, meeting different people, different characters. So they have to be able to adjust and ability to to get on with different people at work. So that is very important. I mean, and the third, I would say, enjoy it. You have to really enjoy what you're doing and have that passion and come to work with a passion to deliver, to do excellent, to be around. You spend half your day with your colleagues. So it's very important that you build that network within the organization and get to learn from others what they've done and have certain sponsors or mentors. That's very important.
Rola, as the first woman to head a bank in the UAE, you're obviously a huge role model for many, many women, for many Emirati women, and we appreciate and thank you for that so much. Gail, do you want to comment on that before I turn it over to a few others?
Sure. I would say I never admit there are obstacles. I think it never occurs to me that something is an obstacle. Early in my career, there were actual laws which prevented me from doing some things. Those changed over time. I think if there's any obstacle, if you will, it's just attitudes that you run into with people. And I don't know that those are related solely to women. They occur in people regardless of what profession you're in and whether you're a male or female and you're trying to progress. You have to deal with difficult people at times and people who have attitudes that are very different from yours. So I think you have to learn early on to work with people. Someone said earlier, women are very much like working in teams, and we make very good teammates. But sometimes you have to overcome different attitudes, and you do that, I think, by doing your job very well, by knowing your subject matter and being able to make your point. You do it by just knowing that you belong where you are because you're good at what you do. And I think that's the most difficult thing. You just run into some attitudes and you get by those.
Thank you.
Danny, can I actually add a point to Rola?
Please,
on that
please.
slide?
And I was going to go to you next, but go ahead, add your point, and then I have a question for you, Shamsa.
So just to add to Rola's wonderful advices, women usually doubt themselves when there are opportunities. My advice is go for it. I mean, we've seen statistics, we've done major studies around this, and typically, for instance, if there is a position open, then we see a lot of male colleagues going for it. Having said that, females might be doubting themselves, wanting to be 100% ready before they go ahead for it. I would really recommend that you go ahead for it. As it's been highlighted in a couple of points earlier, we learn as we go. And there are always new things for us to learn on a daily basis. So go for it, don't doubt yourself, and keep that trust in yourself. And trust me, you will go places.
Thank you, Shamsa. So we have to give Citi a big shout out, because recently Citi named Jane Fraser as its CEO, making her the first female CEO of a major US bank. And the question is, does the appointment of Jane Fraser at Citigroup as CEO signal that the industry recognizes the need for more women in the C-suite? And how long before we see the next Jane Fraser and some other major US banks? You want to comment on that, Shamsa?
Absolutely. So first of all, it's a great honor for me to be working in Citi when they're making history by appointing the first CEO female. You know, there was definitely a wave of appointments afterwards we've seen, whether within Citi or outside of Citi. And this is definitely not, it's the beginning, but not, you know, it will continue to progress going forward. There are a lot of appointments that we actually had prior to that that are worth noting. So for instance, you know, Elisar, who's our CEO for UAE, Levant, and Iraq. We also had, you know, one of the first chairwomen to be appointed in the region as well that I wanted to highlight. So there has been progress across the board, and we are seeing it more and more happening, and it's extremely important. So hopefully, you know, the new generation is seeing the new role models taking place and progressing.
And I would be very remiss, Shamsa, if I did not mention Elisar. Elisar is also a force in the UAE. And like I call Rola from time to time, I call Elisar from time to time and to get my marching orders and to mind my P's and Q's, because she always knows and she's always plugged in and knows what's going on. And again, a wonderful example of leadership and what you can do when you have the right people in leadership roles. So thank you, Shamsa, for that. Mercedes and Raja, I want to give you a chance to register some points here. Go ahead, Mercedes, on this overall question.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, and in the career, I've worked in Brussels, in London, now in the UAE. I work in the financial services sector, but also in politics and for the regulators. So I guess my advice will be, and I think we've discussed this as well. I think you need to be very clear about what your career plan is and know what success looks for you, because success doesn't look the same for everyone. I also agree that finding a sponsor, it's extremely important, and making sure that this person will support you. And if the person ends up moving to a different position, just make sure they introduce you to somebody else. And very important, and I think this is something that kind of differentiates male from female, build your network. I think networking is very much like nutrition and fitness. We know what to do, but the hard thing is actually making it a priority. And I think a lot of men tend to go for drinks after work, which is not necessarily the case for women. So I think it's very important to find your way of networking, be it at events, be it at networking, peer reviews, conferences, you name it, whatever works for you. But if other people are networking and you are not, that's going to have an impact in your application for any future role.
That's a really important point. And I have to tell you, in my early career, in the first 20 years of my career, my bosses were all women, and they were outstanding at networking. And I learned my networking skills from them, actually, instead of the other way around. So it's a very, very important point for sure. Raja, do you want to make a point?
Yes, looking at the situation we're in right now, we realize that it's really important to build a personal brand, and this personal brand can be developed by contributing to the industry as well, because that's what will make you relevant within that industry. So even if you build your network, you contribute to the industry by writing a post or writing a blog or contributing to an article, doing a lot of volunteer work as well will enable building that network. The other thing that is important for women to pay attention to is that it is okay to ask. Usually women are hesitant to ask, and once I realized that it was actually okay to go ask for a promotion or ask for an increment or ask for an opportunity, I was actually given that opportunity. And I'm really grateful to the organization and the opportunities that I'm working within, because it is male dominated, it is very competitive, but in the same time, it opens additional opportunities. And this is how I, for example, landed in the fintech industry. I've asked the governor to be part of this journey, and I was given that opportunity, and I got really excited about it, learned about it, and created a position for myself within the organization and within the industry. So it is okay to ask, I mean, build a network, ask for opportunities, ask to be part of committees and task groups and focus groups, and volunteer, and it will all come back with great rewards.
Thank you, Raja. I'm going to ask Raja and then Mercedes just a 3 or 4 sentence answer to this question. For Raja, DIFC boasts the Accelerate Her program, a female-focused career mentorship accelerator. Can you say a few words about that, a few sentences? And then Mercedes, the same for you. With you had the gender initiative at ADGM, and give us a few words on the on background of that. These 2 important initiatives at the DIFC and ADGM in the UAE. You know, sort of flipping on end these perceptions about females in the male-dominated sector and in the male-dominated Middle East. Please, Raja.
So as I mentioned earlier, we started the whole fintech journey back in 2017, and we've realized that there is a great opportunity for a new sector to evolve in partnership with the financial services sector. And at that time, we've realized that we really need to increase awareness about this opportunity and extend it to as many women as possible so that they understand the opportunity that is available and also how to be part of it. So we launched the program Accelerate Her, which is focused on developing the female talent from the financial services sector. So we look at the institutions that are part of our network and we say, please nominate 1 or 2 ladies from the bank, whether it's Standard Chartered or Citi or HSBC, and we bring them on to the Fintech Hive. We introduce them to the startups that are part of the program. We introduce them to mentors from the network, and we plug them with tech and legal and regulatory workshops so that they have an overview of the industry and then enable them take a decision to move within that industry. And so far, the program has been very successful in inspiring women to be part of it. We saw a lady who was in our program last year launch her fintech company this year and started her journey with the Fintech Hive. This is one example, but they are creating a major impact wherever they are, and they inspire more women to join that journey. So we believe it's important to start very early, even with a small number, but we are sure that the impact would be really great at the industry level.
Thank you, Raja. Mercedes, do you want a couple words about what you're doing with your program?
Sure. So we launched our Gender Equality Initiative last year, and the initiative is based on 3 main programs. So it's leading by example, working collaboratively, and championing effective change. So we are looking at these, we're doing it both inward and outward facing. So internally, we are rolling out a number of salary reviews, developing unconscious bias training, putting together flexible working practices and parental leave to ensure that all of our practices are gender neutral. Externally, we have formed a number of partnerships with different organizations. We've named before 30% Club, Aurora 50, the US Embassy in the U.A.E, but also the Man Incubator and Accelerators and others. And then these collaborations have now led to the formation of the Gender Equality Working Group. This is a platform that we have created to bring together all this great work, all these initiatives in a coordinated way so that we can amplify their efforts. So we are very much looking at concrete initiatives to showcase progress on specific issues, whether we're talking about women in leadership, women on boards, women in entrepreneurship, women in finance. And let me just mention one initiative that we are very proud of is called the Pathway 20, being done by the Aurora 50. If anyone is interested, please let me know. So this initiative here in the UAE is looking to bring together talented women to make sure and put them on top positions, different boards across the UAE. Again, to tackle the issue that we see here, that we don't have enough women on top managerial or leadership positions. So that's what we're doing very much.
Thank you. And that That leads to a question that we received early in the discussion from a friend of a long time named Sunjin Choi. And Sunjin asks broadly the question about the plexiglass ceiling breaking on Wall Street. She asks about your views on the 30% Club in the UK and the 30% Coalition Board diversity in the US. So Mercedes, you touched on that a little bit, but maybe if I could ask Rola and Gail and others to just touch on this question of, are these organizations and groups that have these goals and objectives, are they making progress? Are they successful? Do you support their work? Just a few words. Rola, you want to go first, and then Gail?
Thank you. I mean, definitely they are, because this is where you would find a network of senior women. But if I can talk, like in Standard Chartered already, we have started on this, and we have a majority, lot of women on our board. We've already signed up 30% of our top by 2020. 30% would be of our senior management would be women. Our CEO, his top team is half women. We have 2 regional CEOs that are women, and around 5 or 6, including myself, globally. So as an institution, we're already on this journey. Now, having these organizations builds the network, which is what we need, because you will still see that women representation on boards is very little. And if we take the UAE, while the legislation is there that a woman should be on every board, but it is still very, very low, below 20%. And such committees or events within ADGM would really help build a database, because what you need is to have that database of these women that have the caliber, and to put forward their names for board elections, because now you have more men being represented, because you have very few women putting forward their names. So building that database is key. And once you have it, then they will go through the process. Similarly, you also need to, it's very important that to have that training to be a board member, because moving from a senior post just immediately to a seat on the board, you need to have that training. Certain countries like Malaysia, they provide you a training, male, female, before being on a board. And I know some organizations here are doing this and have started approaching certain women to train them, so that then they put forward their names to boards. And this is where it helps having, yes.
They feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah.
Gail, do you want to make a comment on the 30% Club or any of that, or any of those organizations?
Yeah, I think those organizations are very effective. I think they're more effective for the populations of larger organizations, and larger organizations have the advantage of the resources and capabilities to actually launch some of these programs internally. If you look in just our world here in the US, in the M&A and in the private equity sector, the majority of those firms are small firms, and they don't have the resources to really launch a lot of programs, and don't have the knowledge, I think, to get connected into them. So we have a lot more responsibility internally just to try to do things on our own. Like I said, our firm is 50-50, men and women, and we make it a policy internally to have women on all the boards of our companies. Again, there's a difference, though, between a private company board and a public company board. But I would say to women, if there's no opportunity for a public company board, start out with a private company board, because they're a little bit easier to access. People are a little bit more willing to take someone on those boards that don't have a lot of experience. And they're a great training ground to move up and to learn and to get on public company boards. But I wish we had more in the US, I think, for the smaller companies and things to access, that we could move some of these things forward.
Ladies, that brings us to the top of the hour and to the end of our session. I want to thank you all so much for this fascinating conversation. There are more questions to be answered, and I think each one of you needs to spend some time at the UAE universities and NYU Abu Dhabi and talk to some of the students. I think they would really benefit from that. Just a quick shout out for later this week, the UAE government is going to turn over the US Pavilion at Expo 2020 on Wednesday, a milestone in our journey on Expo, very, very important. And next week, the Business Council will host a webinar on some of the post-election update, if you will, of what's going on in the United States. So those are the two big programming events that we have coming up with the organization in the next 10 days before Thanksgiving, or what we call Turkey Day, next Thursday in the United States. So again, ladies, thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful evening in the UAE, and Gail back in the US, have a great day in the United States today. Take care and good night and good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.